Meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Hello, Mr. Coulter. Welcome to you. I expect you'll be part of our three-act play this morning. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of January 25th, please? Thank you, Ms. Daly. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as they have been provided to you? Madam Clerk, hello. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. All right. Could I get a motion to accept Mr. Rosenbaum? Thank you, Mr. Fennell. A second from Ms. Relaford. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Paul, you're in. Welcome. Mr. Sorrell.
All right. Informational items, Mr. Chairman. Springdale minutes. I don't have anything to report. Obviously, we've got a resolution to discuss. I'd open it up to either Ms. Daly or Ms. Pastusha if they have anything to add since they are on the authority board.
See blank screen, so we'll go from that. All right. Thank
Hearing
you.
done. No report received to be placed in your packet from the county auditor, and I don't see her in the audience. And then the Headington financials you just heard about at Finance Committee.
Yes. Any questions about either topic? Most notably the Headington Oaks financials. Seeing none, we'll move along. Can I get a motion to place before the members of the committee the Springdale Cemetery Intergovernmental Agreement? Ms. Pastusha on the first and Ms. Daly on the second. I will ask, since there was a fair amount of discussion on this last time, Scott, if you'd be pretty thorough, I'd appreciate it.
I will make every effort to, Mr. Chairman. And one of the things that we talked about last time is that we would have a presentation. The same presentation will be made by the city manager to the city council, and will be also be made to the park board by their executive director. This was prepared by Gretchen and the communications director at the city. So just quickly an overview of Springdale for everyone. It was founded in 1854. It's designed as both a cemetery and a public park. It's 227 acres in size and accessible from Prospect, just south of the Heights, to just north of Glen Oak Park, below the bluff. It does hold the remains of more than 70,000 individuals, with room for many, many more still to come. In addition to burial plots, they have a large public mausoleum, 15 private mausoleums, a garden for scattering ashes, and a special pet burial area, and it is listed on the National Register. Just a little bit of history. It was part of the rural cemetery movement, which was offered residents a burial option other than one associated with a church by creating a non-denominational and architecturally designated burial place. It was intended to be a place for the living, attractive parks with scenic vistas, water features, forested areas are included. It's a restive place for all people to enjoy both refined outdoor recreation amidst art and sculpture that was previously accessible only to those with great wealth. And I'm sure when Ms. Pastusha makes some comments, she might even share some of her childhood memories walking through the park, which she shared with me multiple times. Some historical figures from our community that are buried at Springdale include Peoria's first mayor, Mr. William Hale, Black Hawk War General, General Uzziah Silman, Moses Pettengill, was a merchant and abolitionist. There was just a story earlier this week about Mr. Pettengill and his work on the Underground Railroad. Fred Solden, who is the first head librarian from the Peoria Public Library. Mr. Cole, who was our first distiller. Mr. McClure, who was a Civil War colonel. Captain Detweiler, famous steamboat captain and Civil War veteran. John Cleveland Proctor, who was the founder of Proctor Hospital and Proctor Home. Lydia Moss Bradley's namesake, or Bradley University's namesake, Lydia Moss Bradley. Hedley Waycott, who was an international artist. Jonathan Boyce Taylor, who was a baseball player, coach, and manager. John Henry Gwynn Jr., who was president of the Peoria NAACP chapter, and Chip Can, who was a Peorian that passed away during 9/11. A key component of this discussion this time was the savanna. There's roughly 14 acres of tallgrass oak savanna that was reestablished after once dominating the Illinois River Bluffs. This is one of only a few areas, not just in central Illinois or the state of Illinois or even the United States. This is one of the few places archaeologically where this type of tall grass oak savanna actually exists, and was formed with the recession of the glaciers over 10,000 years ago. So it's an incredibly important natural asset to the community. Some previous history in terms of kind of how the three units of government came to be in the position that we're in today. Former owners Larry and Cynthia Leach mismanaged those funds. They grossly neglected the maintenance and failed to keep adequate records. They diverted over $200,000 of the cemetery funds into their own private accounts. Less than $40,000 of the approximately $220,000 annual revenue was applied to maintenance, resulting in significant disrepair of the grasslands, the buildings, and grave markers. In September of 1999, the state comptroller, under his authority, revoked the operating license for the Leaches and fined them $10,000 for violating the Cemetery Care Act. It was put into receivership with Judge Eagleton as the caretaker. Mr. Eagleton found the cemetery accounts drained and made pleas to the public to help recover some of those costs. And that also included such things as the cannons from Soldiers Hill that were taken from the cemetery. From 1999 to 2002, there was a transition to intergovernmental partnership. That was the time in which Judge Eagleton was caretaker on behalf of the state comptroller. They had to work through pending litigation, liens on the property, no care fund whatsoever, and over $3.5 million of repairs and maintenance that were needed, along with oversight of regulations that were put in place by the comptroller's office. The existing foundation that does such things as repairing grave markers began to engage ourselves, the city of Peoria, and the Park District to try and find a solution. That resulted in an intergovernmental agreement that the three bodies approved in 2002 that is going to be expiring later this year. We talked a little bit about that at this committee last month. Under the terms of that agreement, the city holds title and owns the cemetery and all of its land. The three bodies under that 2002 agreement created a management authority to oversee its operations. Around our horseshoe, Ms. Pastusha is one of our representatives. Ms. Daly is an appointee of the city of Peoria. Under the current composition, the city has three appointees. One of them is always the chairperson, so the city appointees control the agenda and run the meetings. Both the Park District and us receive two appointees each, and then the Historic Preservation Foundation of Springdale has two appointees, provided that they have at least a $25,000 cash gift or in-kind services on an annual basis. And since the inception of this agreement, their contribution on an annual basis has been an in-kind services, and it's pretty well documented to exceed that $25,000 number, but there's never been a cash contribution. Prior to the creation of the intergovernmental agreement, the foundation and volunteers such as Peoria Wilds were the ones that largely maintained the cemetery. It's pretty well documented in the media that they were the ones that were actually mowing at that point in time. What the agreement did is it provided a contract with the district to maintain the cemetery at the district's costs. Some additional components to that agreement that's expiring. So it was a maximum length of 20 years, but it had an initial term of 10 years, and then we had to affirmatively exercise the extension for the second 20 years, which this body did in 2012. The operating deficits that were not covered by the foundation and by throughout the course of the agreement, it was stipulated that the first $80,000 in a calendar year were to be divided evenly between the county and the park district, 50-50. If there were operating deficits beyond that, we would cover the second amount up to $20,000. So now we're at a net of $100,000 of operating deficit, and anything beyond that, the city would be responsible for. And since the inception of the agreement, their average annual coverage of operating deficits has been approximately $230,000. So the total net operating deficit is $330,000 on average. The park district and the county, as I just explained, cover that first $100,000. So what's in the new agreement that's before you today for consideration? We met for several weeks and maybe even months at this point, led by Ms. Pastusha. There's representatives from all three governing bodies and the management authority as we worked through the various issues of how to move forward. What the new agreement will do is that the city will continue to maintain or retain the ownership of the cemetery. The city will subdivide and sell the area designated as the Savannah, and it's a designated state natural area, and it'll sell it to the park district or deed it to the park district for $1. The park district will then be responsible for the permanent environmental stewardship and maintenance of the Savannah. The management authority has some changes to it in terms of composition. The city goes from 3 members to 5 members. They still retain the chairmanship. We remain at 2 members. The park district goes down to 1 member, and the Historic Preservation Foundation goes down to 1 member, and that's provided that they make either a $25,000 cash contribution every year, or they have in-kind services equal to that or greater. One quick note on that specific item as before I advance to the next slide. The version of the agreement that's in the packet will, based on some feedback from the Park District's attorney, will need some cleanup language. Our recommendation today is should you want to endorse it, we'll pass it out of committee as is, and then we'll be prepared to give you a floor amendment at the county board meeting that'll have that cleanup language in it. Additionally, in terms of the new agreement, it provides that the park district will continue to contract to maintain the cemetery at the park district's cost. The term is the same as the original agreement. There's a 10-year term, and then there is an option to extend. It is not an automatic option. You actually will, or whoever's sitting around the horseshoe in 10 years will have to pass a resolution that affirms you want to remain in the agreement. If that resolution is not adopted, then we're out. Any of the 3 parties, or any of the 4 parties, including the foundation, but really the 3 parties, the city, the county, and the park district, may terminate with the agreement with 1 year's written notice and paying the sum of $150,000. The agreement that is expiring, that dollar value was $120,000. So this is going from $120 to $150 in terms of what the the obligation for termination would be. Financial obligations for the Park District. And this is part of the reason why they will have one fewer member. Their maximum annual cash contribution stays at $40,000. They will be splitting that first $80,000 of operational deficit with us, just as they have been for the last 20 years. But they're out at $40,000 as they are today. It's also acknowledged that the Park District's annual expense for maintaining the Savannah has some inherent value. There was a Zoom meeting last week that the Park District hosted where Ms. Cahill shared that their annual estimated cost of maintaining the Savannah is going to be, in today's dollars, $15,000 to $20,000. So you may or may not want to mentally apply that number to the $40,000 that they put towards operating deficits. Yes, Mr. Fennell.
So on the management operation of it today, is that going to reduce their cost by that close to $20,000 for maintenance on the Savannah that we're not going to have to do?
So that would have been, it potentially could, yes, Mr. Fennell. The maintenance of the cemetery itself has always been set up so that the management authority was supposed to pay the Park District to maintain. Ms. Pastucci or Ms. Daly can probably provide better insight as to whether or not that actually occurred, or whether the cemetery authority has its own crew that, say, for example, mows and edges. But it would be potentially a cost avoidance if the cemetery authority, management authority, was going to have to maintain the Savannah. Now today the Savannah is really maintained by volunteers, but those volunteers are getting up there in age, and they aren't going to be able to do that in perpetuity, or even for much longer for that matter. And so that sets it up for potentially avoiding a future cost versus eliminating an existing cost. Financial obligations for the county. We talked about last month about limiting what ours would be as it relates to adjusting for inflation, but also a comment was made about trying to have an escalator in our contribution. So as is written, we again have that first $40,000 that we share with the Park District to get to the first 80, and then after that, in year one, we would be on the hook for a maximum of $62,000, taking our total max out of pocket in year one to $102,000. And then we would be agreeing to increase that $62,000 portion by $2,000 a year through year 10, so that when you get to the 10th year of the agreement, it would be at $120,000. There are no provisions for it to go beyond, increase beyond $120,000 after year 10, because the agreement will have to be affirmed to continue forward at that point in time, and there would be a provision for whoever's county administrator, city manager, and parks director at that time, whoever's sitting around this horseshoe and the other two horseshoes, for parties to come together and negotiate what the financial obligations might be for the second 10 years should we go there. And then lastly, the city is still going to be on the hook for everything else above and beyond what the Park District and the county does not cover from an operating deficit standpoint. Last slide is just some timelines. Today, obviously, you're having this discussion. Should it get out of committee, it'll go to the board meeting on the 10th. The City Council will be considering it on Tuesday the 8th, and the Park Board will be considering it at their meeting on March 9th. So so next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, there will be opportunities for all three policy-making bodies to adopt the intergovernmental agreement. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to try and answer any questions.
Thank you. I'm sure there'll be a few. Would either Kate or Ms. Daly like to make any comments before I take questions? Ms. Pastucci?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank Scott and Emily Cahill, Patrick, Pam Johnson, who's chair of the Springdale Cemetery Management Authority, and Mark Matuzak, who is the manager of the cemetery. We've been meeting off and on since September to work on this. And, some people may be wondering why is Springdale special that we have this intergovernmental agreement. And really it has to do with that piece in the presentation about it, being mismanaged and going into disrepair. Most cemeteries have an endowment for perpetual care. Springdale does not. So that's why, it's a huge part of Peoria's history and the individuals who are buried there. And so for a long time, because of the disrepair, there were no burials, of any significance for quite some time. Even in the beginning of the intergovernmental agreement that's now expiring, I think that there was a lot of struggle amongst, how the cemetery should be managed. I feel like we are finally, in the past, 5-10 years, we've gotten to this place where we're cruising. Mark Matuzak has done an excellent job at managing the cemetery. He's been responsible for, getting the entrance now looks very nice. Before there was nothing. You just kind of drove in and there wasn't really anything there. Now it has the old style stone columns, and the style of those columns actually are exactly what used to be the old entrance to the cemetery, which was down on Perry Street. Those have degraded to the point where they're no longer even there. They've fallen apart. Also, when you entered into that old entrance, there used to be an old caretaker's home there that was a little stone house with a Spanish tile roof. And so I've always lived very close to the cemetery, and so I don't have any family buried there, but it's a very special place because I've just always used it as a park. It's a nice place to walk. It's beautiful. In fact, I was looking back. I went into my basement and I dug up some old I used to be into photography in high school. I'm talking about 35 millimeter, developing my own film, print sheets. So I've got some old pictures that if I could find a place to develop them, I'd love to share them with you. But when I was in high school, I used to walk my dog and run in the cemetery for cross country. And there was a guy living under a tarp near the creek. I mean, it was just, this was the 90s, and this is the time when it was being severely mismanaged. The whole cemetery looked like a prairie because it was not being mowed. So if you leave a cemetery like that in that state, it's going to eventually crumble into nothing. And it's a huge cemetery to manage. So one of the pieces that has been a concern and a point of contention in the past is the savanna. Part of the problem is that, there's already so much to maintain. Adding that maintenance, if the volunteers are no longer maintaining that, that would be a burden to the management. To me, it's almost. I don't know even how to describe it. I think it was a great suggestion that I believe Patrick Urick came up with to deed that portion of the cemetery to the park district. It's a brilliant solution, and I think it's checking the boxes on everybody's concern list. It keeps the savanna protected. It keeps the savanna well maintained. It means that the management authority doesn't have to worry about that. Because we have enough to worry about with just maintaining all of the areas that need to be mowed and trimmed. And, on top of burials, which, by the way, in the past year, we've just had the best year ever. I think people are starting to realize that the cemetery is being well managed, and so we're starting to see an increase in people who are being buried there. We recently had a brand new family mausoleum built there, which is extremely impressive with the Johnson family. The Oberhaumans just put up 3 obelisks for their family monument. The Green family has a burial plot there. So I think people are starting to realize that it's the place to be buried, and your memory will be taken care of, in your history. So I know that was kind of a long rambling explanation, but it's a place that's very special to me. So
You, Kate, did Ms. Daly want to add anything?
Just briefly, I think probably people can see what happens when a property like this isn't taken care of. And you can see that with the county having to take care of the mausoleum because of certain financial situations that happened there. Probably the most appalling thing to me was that when Larry Leach owned that cemetery, he took the priceless and historic Civil War cannons and sold them. So he stripped every dime out of that place he could. And we have the Springdale Cemetery Authority has such a nice partnership, not only with the county, the city, and the park district, but also with the Historical Society, because it's an opportunity for people to come, and we have people who do reenactments of famous Peorians that are buried there, and there's an opportunity for schools to do that and others. The other thing that we have that is nationally used is Grave Finder. And so if you're into genealogy and historical records, you can use Grave Finder to go back and research your family's genealogy. But Kate covered most of what I would say. But if you're thinking, well, I represent a district in the county, and how does this apply to me? I think you'd be really surprised at the number of people from both the city and the county who have family members who are there.
Thank you, Ms. Daly. Members, Mr. Dillon, then Dr. Blair.
Thanks, Chairman. I just need to, it takes a long time to change perceptions, so I think Mr. Matuzak and the board has done a very good job of changing perceptions that it is safe to bury your family there. And kudos to Scott. I think last month we had a broad discussion of comments, and I believe a lot of the concerns that were brought up have been addressed in this deal, plus it's not tying a board to any long-term deal that another board would have to decide. So I'd like those agreements. But one last wrinkle in here, which I never thought of until I just had read the minutes from the last meeting, is where they would, I never thought it would be possible that the city's number would ever be able to go down instead of just up. But there is talk of a large endowment being created that would fund it and lower the tax subsidies burden. Is there anything in that agreement that says, because we'll be on 102, 2,000 plus a year, that our number can never be larger than the city's number? Because in theory, if they brought down their endowment and it became self-sustaining, we could be the largest funder of a property that we don't even own. I don't see that probably is going to happen over the next 10 years.
I
but
think the trigger, Jimmy, is operating losses, right? For any of the contributions.
Correct. It is operating losses. There's the hope and expectation that an endowment will be recapitalized and recreated. And Ms. Pastucha, as the new chair or president of the foundation board, is going to lead a capital campaign and fundraising campaign to start down that path. We did have some initial conversations about what that would look like if operating deficits shrank to the point where it was where we were being a major contributor or the major contributor. And I think we were keenly aware of that in our discussions, but I think we also acknowledged that the likelihood of that happening in the next decade is incredibly small. Kate, you want to, did I misspoke, or you want to add
yeah, and
anything to
just
that?
I agree. I think that the chances, it would be nice, but the chances of that happening are small. And at year 10, we would have the ability to readjust those amounts, correct? Okay.
So that
Well,
it,
plus you have an exit strategy there too.
you do have the exit strategy, but I don't foresee it, but would it be a big deal to put a line item in the contract at that moment that we would never be the most? Or open up a provision that if our 102, 104 was the most, there would, because us in the Park District are responsible for the first amount of money in. So, in theory, if their operating loss is $100,000, the city of Peoria is out $0. I don't foresee that happening, but if it's not going to happen or not be an issue, it shouldn't be a big issue to put in a clause in there that our money would never be the most money. I'm not looking to blow up the agreement at the last moment. But since we do have to change this and there's some legal things that need to be finalized prior for an amendment.
Let me ask counsel just a sec. What's your view on this?
I was just reviewing, there is language about the city's contribution, isn't there, Scott, if you have it in front of you, about it can't go under a certain amount? If you could just give me a couple more minutes, let me take a look.
All right, just so that the suspense can be dialed down a notch, I'm going to pause the meeting for 5 minutes, okay? And then we'll adjourn in 5 minutes.